Welcome, everybody. My name's Stan Holt. I am a consultant with Partners for Impact, and I'm working with S3 Housing Connect in Sanford and Lee County. It's a task force that really looks at the system associated with moving people from a state of homelessness into housing in Sanford and Lee County. And our hope is that we get to share this with you on Veterans Day, because we wanted to highlight the challenges that veterans have who are homeless. So we've put together a panel. And so we've got a panel of three individuals who work with veterans. And then we have some other folks who are part of the S3 community who will be helping ask questions. And so with that, what I want to do is have the panelists introduce yourself and just name, organization, how long you've been there, and just a short snippet of what you do for the veterans, because we'll get into the services later. So I'll start with Toya. I'll start with you, and then we'll do Max, and then we'll do Marvin. And then we'll have Ruth and Rachel, since you're visible, introduce yourselves as S3 folks, okay?
Thank you, Stan. My name is Toya Burgess, and I am the Healthcare for Homeless Veterans Program Coordinator here at the Fayetteville VA. I've been with the Fayetteville VA for 8 years, but with the VA as a total for 12. And out of those 12 years, 8 of those have been with the homeless program. So those are the services that's what I do right now. That's my role.
Great, Toya. Max, how about you?
My name is Max Dolan, and I work with Defense Health Agency's Recovery Coordination Program as a peer support coordinator. I work with the caregivers of wounded, ill, and injured service members and disabled veterans throughout North Carolina, South Carolina, and West Virginia.
Cool, great. And Marvin, how about you?
My name is Marvin Toni. I work with the Lee County Veteran Services. I'm a veteran service officer here in Lee County. I've been doing this here in Lee County for about 1.5 years, and then I did kind of like an intern for almost 2 years at Harnett County Veteran Services.
Super. Thanks all to you all as panelists, both for what you do every day for the veterans that you work with, and for being here today. Ruth, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself as part of the leadership with S3?
Okay, my name is Ruth Price, and I'm a vice chair with the S3 team. It's a new experience for me too, because I've only been with S3 about 2 or 3 years. So I'm always enjoying learning and understanding all the needs and difficulties that occur with various crises.
Super. And then Rachel, how about you?
Hi, my name is Rachel Picard, and Karen Kennedy's with us too. You just can't see her right now. We both work with City of Sanford and S3 Housing Connect.
Great. So the first question I'm going to get into as part of the panel discussion is really just kind of talking about the veterans that you serve. You know, who are they? What are their ages? What era, right? Were they Vietnam era? Were they, I don't know if any of you are still working with World War II veterans or not, but what era were they a part of? And any other demographic information that you might share about who the veterans are. We'll get into the homelessness piece later, but talk about veterans in general. And I think, Max, I'll start with you and then go to Toya and then go to Marvin. Max, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, I work with veterans of all eras. Very rarely will I have a World War II veteran. I've had a significant number of Korean War veterans. About 38% of my veterans are Vietnam era, and about 38% are post 9/11. And so I get a wide variety of veterans. Mostly we get issues of, with the post 9/11 veterans, of PTSD, traumatic brain injury, the non-visible wounds. And we do, along with that, have a lot of physical injuries. Very rarely do I actually have a veteran who's like missing arms and legs, because they have vast organizations that specialize in caring for them. but I spend most of my time, I'm going to say 9/10 of my time, with disabled veteran caregivers themselves and with their veterans, and about 10% of my time with active duty, although my original assignment was to work only with active duty, but we find that they go through their medical board when they're wounded, ill, and injured, and become disabled veterans under VA's care so quickly that most of them are now disabled vets.
Okay. Super. Toya, who do you work with at the
Well, we
home?
work with all areas as well. Our focus, however, is homeless. We work with those that are not just homeless, but there's a certain criteria for them, which would be that they have to be homeless. They have to be a certain income, under a certain income level. They have to require intensive case management with referrals to substance abuse, mental health, and or primary care providers. So they would have to need all those wraparound services and intensive case management, low income, and again, just anyone that comes through the door.
Do you have any sense of do you have a majority of the era that that are coming, or just all, is it pretty wide?
It's
variety.
Pretty wide. It's pretty wide right now. The younger folks, though, the 18s through the 30s, not as much as the older guys, which would be 30 and above.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Marvin, how about you? Who are you seeing just in general, in terms of veterans in general?
Mostly I see a wide range of them too. I see very few World War IIs, very few Korea War eras. I do see a lot of Vietnam era and 9/11, post 9/11 veterans, and also deal with a lot of the spouses or family members also of veterans.
Mm. So, Toya, you started with this, your answer. You say that most of all of yours are required to be homeless.
Yes.
But Max, Marvin, what percentage of the folks that you see are homeless?
I'd say about 11%. I've actually kept track of these things. About 11% are homeless or near homeless. They may be living in cars or with friends. They might not be classified as homeless VA standards. Some of them may be living in a hotel where somebody's put up for a while. And like 2 weeks ago, I went to one of our local hotels that caters to people who are semi-homeless. And I found 5 of the residents there were disabled veterans.
Wow.
Now, I'm pretty much still new to this, so I haven't really seen that many. I probably have seen about around 4 so far within the year and a half I've been working as a certified veteran service officer.
Okay. So, I had at one point in my career, I had interviewed homeless vets, and at some point I can't remember, right? I'm getting old. But is there a difference depending on the era that you're a veteran and the benefits that you get, or how you're discharged, and what you're eligible for in services? I'll take whoever wants to answer that.
I can speak to that for our program, for the Healthcare for Homeless Veterans program. There is a discharge status that you have to be at. You cannot have a dishonorable or other than honorable. If you're pending an upgrade, we will consider that, but that upgrade has to be in place. You have to be VA eligible for services, and I mean for full services. So that would be your mental health, your substance abuse services, and your primary care, because that's what we provide. We provide those linkages, and you have to be able to have that. And I do know that some veterans that come through, even with the bad discharges, they come through and they're able to get specific services if that was a reason that they, like mental health, if that's part of the reason why they were discharged with a bad discharge, they still are eligible for mental health, but they still are not eligible for our program.
Okay. Any other thoughts and on that, Max or Marvin?
Depending on certain time frame, how long they've been in the military can limit their access to benefits. On some different benefits, the characteristic of discharge limits them, especially if you're being unauthorized absence, could bar you from a lot of VA benefits and stuff like that also.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with us, I've noticed that a lot of times there's some really complex factors involved, and we don't, I just don't turn anybody away, because sometimes you'll find a guy whose discharge paperwork doesn't look quite right, but you're never quite sure, are they really a veteran or not? Or what's the deal with this? And so I ran into a veteran one time who had been carrying his DD Form 214 around since the 1980s, folded up in his wallet. And it was a good one. I made a copy and I said, let's make some copies of this before it falls apart. Let's go to VA and get you a new copy. And okay, how long were you in service? 16 weeks, huh? Okay, well, I forgot how long he'd been in service, but it was long enough to where even though he was injured in his advanced individual training very badly, and they put him out, they told him he could get back in if he wanted to later, if he was physically able, but he didn't. But he was homeless, he was indigent, he wasn't addicted to anything, he wasn't an alcoholic, he was divorced, and we just kind of moved heaven and earth. And by golly, VA took him over. They gave him a good physical. They discovered he had cancer. They cured the cancer. We got him a place to live. We got him a job. He moved. He's very, very successful in Charlotte now, and I couldn't be happier. But all that started off with a guy who was living in a flooded basement in a church, and who the church people came to me and said, can you help this guy? And so you never know what situation you're going to run into. And the biggest thing and the nicest thing in a job like mine is that I never have to say, no, I can't help you. The worst I could say is, let's see what we can do, and let's see who else might be able to help. And we could start with VA and we can move out from there. And not that everybody gets what they want, but usually they get what they need. And I think that's what's important.
And Marvin, I think you it's interesting because I think that starts the discussion about, some programs have kind of, restrictions on who they can serve. Other programs like yours are a wider door, and all those begin to piece together the services that are needed for homeless folks, homeless veterans. Toya, do you have any stories, or Max shared a really powerful story? How about you? Any stories that are just so memorable about some of the challenges that they brought to the table that you had to really work with and overcome? And if you want me to come back to you, I can.
Yes, if you would, because I want to think of a real good one.
Okay. Marvin, do you have any?
Dealing with homelessness, the very first one I've dealt with, we got them into other services to help them, and they actually found them a place to stay up in Durham area, I believe it was. And here recently, he has been able to get on his feet, and now he's moved back to the Sanford area.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. So Toya, you got your story?
I do.
Great.
I do. It reminds me of, I was a case manager at this time here in Fayetteville, but a young lady who came through the door with her 2 children, and she was homeless. Her husband actually had put her out, but she was the veteran.
Mm-hmm.
And she was afraid. She didn't know where she was going to stay. She didn't know what she was going to do with her kids. She thought that CPS was going to swoop in and take them. You know what happens. So she didn't know who to trust. But I remember just having a conversation with her and telling her, if she follows the process, we would be able to get her where she needs to be, her and her children. Just follow the process and believe. And she
Mhm.
did that. She did everything that we asked her to do, everything. And we were able to get her at that time. We had a women's and children's shelter. So we were able to get her there while still working with her. We worked with her. She went back to school. She did get housing. We got her into housing, but she went back to school, and she ended up moving her and her voucher to Raleigh, where she in the long run came back and told me that she's buying a house. So it worked out, and I was just so proud of her and so proud of the program that the process worked and got her and her children out of homelessness. So we have a few stories like that, just more than one,
Mhm.
where,
Yeah.
if you follow the process.
Mhm. Yeah. So that brings up an interesting point. I guess, how many of your folks that you serve are women with children? Is that atypical, not typical?
Well, we do have some, and I would say, but the percentage is much lower than males.
Okay.
I would say out of the the whole caseloads that we have, it would be perhaps about 15% out of all,
Okay.
which is quite low in the big grand scheme of things,
Yeah. Yeah.
And they typically, when they go in, they seem to not do a revolving door type thing,
Mm-hmm.
where we get that with the single males a lot. They
Uh-huh.
come in, they get services, they go back out, they lose the house, they come in, but the females tend to do a little better.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that. And Marvin and Max, you start. Marvin, let's start with you. What are some of the biggest challenges that you see with the homeless folks that are showing up that are veterans?
Well-
What are some of the biggest challenges? Oh, of course, we know housing is one, right? They're
Right.
homeless. But what are some of the other things that are going on?
Well, a lot of veterans don't know what programs are available for them.
Mhm.
Like even filing a claim, today we had a veteran come in. He didn't know that he could file a claim for disabilities. Others, one in particular I know of is if they're a National Guard, they're not typically considered a veteran or a reservist unless they retire. So sometimes that's a very challenging to get them into the VA, and when the VA doesn't really recognize them as a veteran just yet. Another thing is their pride. Sometimes they're too prideful to come in.
Mm-hmm. Max, how about you? What are the challenges that you see that the homeless vets bring?
I find at least three. And I think the big one for homeless veterans would be their mental health challenges. And that sometimes just complicates the issue tremendously. There's a lack of trust. There's a growing fear. There's maybe they don't even trust VA, and they're just sort of frightened. They don't want to get corralled in. They want to stay off the grid. They think that Big Brother's watching them. Lots of these issues they're really kind of strange, but they complicate things. And along with that comes substance abuse, both drugs and alcohol. But I think the biggest substance abuse problem that we have today is probably from pain medications that were provided by the military and by VA. And then suddenly everyone started to realize that those things were so highly addictive that those things are really, really difficult to break. And so then you have to overcome the trust barrier. And here with S3, we've got Dr. Hall and his wife who go out and actually contact homeless people, including veterans. And when they can have a good talk to them, they can establish rapport and say, we're here to help your physical needs, and also their spiritual needs, which can't be overlooked. And then there's one last thing that is more of a barrier than you'd think. An animal is very comforting for a veteran in general, and a homeless veteran with a dog, especially one that's not really a trained service animal, it's very difficult for them to find a shelter that will take them and their animal. And they do not want to be separated from those animals. They would rather live in the woods in a tent or under a blanket than they would to be separated from that animal for any reason. And I think that's more significant than we would think initially.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had one veteran that had 2 dogs, and he'd rather sleep in his car than let his dogs be separated from him. Because where
Yeah.
we were trying to get them into, they didn't want animals in there.
Mm-hmm. Toya, how about you? What are the challenges that the folks bring?
Well, they bring, of course, the substance abuse and mental health issues and the distrust, but some of the behaviors that they have, because of being out and being homeless for so long, it carries into when you're trying to locate housing for them. And when you do get them in housing, the behaviors are such, and even when you're bringing in animals, you know, that they tend to still live as if they're still out in the street. And landlords, now they don't care for that, so they're quick to evict them. They'll try to get rid of them because they don't want that. They don't want the continuing use of drugs. Our program is a housing first program, so housing first says they can continue to drink and use drugs and have mental health issues, and we're gonna do our best to get them the services, but we can't force them into the services or to remain in services. So when they have the relapses and when they, their mental health goes off haywire and they're tearing up the apartments, now we have problems getting other homeless veterans placed at certain places because the landlords just don't trust us anymore. So it makes it very difficult.
So I'm hearing a lot. I mean, one of you said something about big brothers watching and lack of trust and just fear and pride even of not wanting to submit that you need help, which all could be tied to mental health issues, right? Mm-hmm. And so what kind of avenues do you have as far as services for these mental health needs when you begin to recognize those needs?
Mm-hmm.
I can answer that one.
Mm-hmm.
At least I can give the beginning to it.
Sure.
There are a multitude of nonprofit organizations in our area and slightly outside of our area that are engaged in these types of operations. One of them that I like very much is the Lone Survivor Foundation, which has a retreat house down in Fayetteville. Another one, and you won't believe this name, it's the Rebel Goat Farm. And it's down south of Fayetteville, and they do a pretty good job too. They also have a retreat house. They actually do long-term care, and they provide both mental health and spiritual counseling at that organization. There's a number of other organizations like the Cohen Clinics, which are nationwide now, which offer free mental health services for veterans and their families. And I have a list of probably 50 nonprofit organizations in North Carolina alone that help with those types of issues.
Toya, you were shaking your head a lot on that. What's yours?
Because the help is there. It is actually there. They have plenty of programs within the VA and outside of the VA in the communities. It's not the programs not being available. It's the willingness to actually participate in the programs. Because none of the programs are going to force you and they're not going to, they hold you accountable. And when you're homeless and you're doing your own thing for so long, the accountability piece can seem like it's micromanaging. It can seem like, if I wanted a mother, I'd stayed at home or, and they don't want that a lot of times. So we're there for them when they're ready. When they're ready. And our program, actually, we do those wraparound services. We do those linkages. But again, you have to want it and you have to really want to participate in it. And if not, it's okay. We're still here and we're still going to offer the help.
And Toya, I think that you make a really good point that some people, you know, throw out their hands and say, why don't you all do something? And you're exactly right. It's all about, are they willing and ready and wanting to ask for that help? And you can't do a whole lot about it until they are ready to ask.
And you gotta, you know, what I heard, you as the provider have to figure out how to really earn the trust. I mean, there's that whole, it's all about the relationship, right? Between the caseworker and the individual showing up. And that's just over and over, that's proved to be a point. I think what's interesting for me is that to hear you all as the folks that work with veterans to talk about the access to mental health services, I'm not sure that exists for homeless people who are not part of the VA. Because what I hear from other folks in a community is that those mental health services are not available and accessible to just folks that aren't necessarily part of a bigger system like the VA. So that's astonishing and great as far as I'm concerned. Ruth, did you have any other follow-up questions? Keep going.
I was a little surprised about the issue with National Guard. Even if the National Guard served overseas active duty, they still aren't considered able to use the benefits.
Now, if they are called to federalized, then they can use the VA benefits and stuff. But if they're, because without that federalization, they are considered state organizations.
Let's see.
So
are there state benefits of any sort that you all are able to work with that clientele of National Guardsmen?
And sometimes if I get one, I normally reach out to the National Guard headquarters in Raleigh.
Okay.
And talk to them. Sometimes they might have a better idea, or I try to find some way to get them in to see where did they serve, how long they served. If you got injured while were on active duty time frame, then you can get seen just for that issue and all, but not. And there's a paperwork that follows that. And a lot of times I've seen that paperwork does not come to fruition for them because they don't want it in their records.
Oh, I see. So it strikes me that Toya's hands are tied where National Guardsmen are concerned. But Max and Marvin, are you able to?
I have no difficulties whatsoever because we don't discriminate in any sense between National Guard reserves or active duty or retirees or two-year veterans or whatever.
Okay.
And so, of course, most of my resources that I come up with, I have over 2,000 individual contacts that I've made over the last 6 years in North and South Carolina and West Virginia. And so I can contact any number of nonprofit organizations who will help with virtually anything. So it's not just homelessness, it's not just mental health, it's not just physical health, but we deal with transportation issues, housing, upkeep problems,
employment.
We deal with all sorts of things. So my connections are very broad and doesn't make me the expert in anything, but I've learned to know who the experts are. So I got a call the other day from NC Serves, which is an organization run loosely by the USO. And there's 4 different NC Serves networks in North Carolina. And the one in our area is called NC Serves Central Carolina. I know them all. And all I have to do is basically snap my fingers and these people stand at attention and say, what can we do for you? And then when they run into a problem they can't solve, like, hey, Max, we need 2 motorized wheelchairs and we need them quick. And VA can't help it because these 2 veterans, their disability has nothing to do with their military service. Can you help? And I said, yeah, I got this guy in Florida. Hang on just a minute. I will shoot you an email with his email address, his phone number. His name is Guy Tedesco. He's waiting to talk to you. He will ship immediately and it won't cost anybody anything. So that kind of resources you got to have. And so not everybody can take the time to develop these resources, but that's what I do. And so Marvin can call me, anybody can call me from VA or wherever and says, we can't help this guy, but I thought maybe you can. What do you think? And then I can pass on the information directly to the veteran, directly to the veteran's caregiver. And what I really like to do is pass it on to the person who the veteran came to, which develops their rapport and their personal relationship with that person. Like if I can share information directly with Marvin, he can pass that on to this other person. Now he's got the information and he also has developed a better relationship for the future with that veteran.
And I was about to ask you, you just prompted me with perfectly with how do the three of you share among yourselves when, for instance, Toya finds a National Guards person and she can't really help them. So are you all able to stay in contact with each other?
We actually are. We have one thing that we do at the VA especially, and I don't know, Max, if you're on it or even you, Marvin, I think you are, but we have like advisory board meetings and we have different meetings that we're all on. And we tell each other, you know, what our program is about, what do we do and how we can help. So we try to keep those lines of communication open. And even after the meetings, then we send forth our personal information so that people can get a hold of us. So if you have someone, then we could, you know, we can get a hold of them and get those services. Like, you know, as Max was speaking, I'm thinking, okay, I have to remember that because I know we have a couple of people that could actually use the service, more than a couple, but, you know, and then we also have the community providers. Each of us have information on community providers that work strictly with just those who are not veterans, non-veterans, or veterans who don't have the discharge statuses. So, you know, just keeping those lines of communication open between each other and sharing what we have on regular meetings, that works for us anyways.
And one good thing I like about the VA is if I can't get a hold of the Fayetteville VA health system for some reason, the VA has a national hotline, which can start the process and it can trickle down to wherever they're located at, either Fayetteville, Sanford, or wherever.
You know, as you all were talking, it makes me realize that, as is always the case, right? When we're working with people in need, we build these networks, and the goal is to build that net so strong that people don't fall through the cracks. Mm-hmm. But people have to find their way to that network, right? And that's huge. And I'll just go ahead and say welcome to Cindy Hall. She's the our chair of our community engagement subcommittee, who's kind of responsible for these videos. So Cindy, we're going to keep rolling. We're in the middle of asking questions. So if you have questions that are popping up, just let us know. Rachel, do you have has anything popped up for you? Because I'm going to start shifting us to the all-important housing question.
So something that was mentioned earlier that I thought was really interesting is when somebody mentioned homeless veterans, spouses, or family members. And you guys mentioned resources, but I just didn't know if those resources could be used for the homeless veterans, family members, spouses, children, if there's resources for them as well.
Good question.
That is a good question. Basically, for our program, they have to come with the veteran. They would have to be with the veteran. The veteran is the one that receives the services. But I will say this, if we house a veteran along with his family, and for some reason he is asked to leave the house and he can't, or he walks away from the house, the family, they do not have to leave. They can continue on. So that's a safety net for the wife or husband and children. So we will do that. But as far as any other services, we're there for the veteran.
Other responses? Good question.
I've seen and I can't remember where exactly it was, but there is some organizations out there that does help the family members and not the veteran. So there is some organizations, and that's one thing I like about Google. You can Google everything.
Yeah, we learn to find those resources. Good caseworkers are just amazing at finding those resources. So I want to get us to the big question, which is housing, right? Max, you don't have access to, you don't have like housing or anything directly, right?
No, there's a
Okay.
number of big nonprofit organizations I can reach out to that provide housing in one way or the other, but some of them are difficult to get into. And once in a while you pop up with somebody that's got a house and they will say, I want to give it to a veteran. But generally speaking, I send people directly to VA because they're the people that really have their finger on the pulse of what's going on with homeless veterans. And they're my go-to folks. And so Toya is going to be number 34 on my VAMC Fayetteville contact list. I just asked her to send me her phone number and her email address so we can keep in contact. The important thing I think to remember is that those of us who do develop resources, that we share them. We don't hoard them for personal power or gain. We share them with others so that everyone can benefit. And so my contact list is wide open. If somebody wants to know who I contact in VA across all the 12 states where I actually work, I'd be happy to provide that to them.
Great. So Marvin, you don't have access to any special units, right?
No, I do not.
Okay. So Toya, you're on because you got the housing. Talk about what's available for veterans in terms of housing.
This is the interesting question because a lot of people think because we're healthcare for homeless veterans that we have houses. We do not. We don't have houses. We don't have apartment buildings. And we can't put you in one. There's a lot of veterans that'll even come to our walk-in because we have walk-in Monday through Friday. And they'll come to the walk-in, they'll say, I need an apartment. Or they'll think that we're rental agents, that we're going to find a house for them. They'll have the money and they'll have the vehicle to find housing, but they want us to do it for them. We don't do that either. But what we will do is if you're eligible, we will assist you as long as you're eligible and you're under the income guidelines. We will assist you of getting we call it the Section 8 for veterans. So that is a HUD program. So we work with HUD and we get vouchers, Section 8 vouchers. We give those to the veterans. They find their housing and we subsidize that. So we work with a lot of realtors in the community. So if we know about a real estate agent here or the low income housing there, or whatever, we'll do our referrals that way. We refer to the community for most of our resources. Mm-hmm. You know, we just link in. So that's how we do that. We'll give them the information and we send them out, or we even have vehicles. We'll take them if they don't have transportation to go look at the apartment buildings. We'll help them get back and forth to the housing authorities. And you got to remember, we're in 21 counties. So we're in 19 counties in North Carolina and 2 counties in South Carolina. So we're just like everywhere. So we're always looking for new resources and new landlords and new housing and places to send our veterans so that they can find a secure housing, safe, secure, and clean housing. We also have tribal HUD-VASH. So down in Lumberton, Pembroke area, we have Section 8 vouchers, which is actually a grant for Native Americans. Their criteria is a little different. They do have to be able to get VA services, but they can be 100% service connected and still receive a voucher and subsidized housing. So, you know, it's very different, and people's situations are always different, in some unique or not unique, but we go through the process and we look and we see what we can do to match it up, the veteran with housing. We have housing specialists in Jacksonville. we have a housing specialist here in Fayetteville, and they do a tremendous job at making sure that the veterans have the resources to go out and look for housing, and we look for it. They'll look for them too. If they have a lead, they'll give them the leads, and and the case managers will follow up with them. So that's how we do our housing, and we're always sharing that information on our. We have a SharePoint site across the whole VA, our Fayetteville VA enterprise, which we share that information with other social workers so that they're able to, if somebody comes to them in primary care, they're able to help them as well.
And I would
Great.
assume that if it's a disabled vet, finding appropriate housing that they can actually use is limited and a challenge to try to find for them.
Yeah, it depends on the disability as well. And, because if they're disabled to the point of receiving fairly decent income, they can find housing and have those other services that the VA offers, services that'll come in and make the house adaptable to a person that's disabled. And whereas if you're low income and you don't have that service connection, you're not going to be able to do that. So we'll have to find housing for you that would be, geared towards disabilities.
Toya, that's great. You're using, when you talk about Section 8 for veterans, is that also the same thing as the VASH voucher, or is that
That is
another?
the VASH voucher.
Is just
That's
voucher?
actually the
Yeah.
VASH
Okay.
voucher. What it is when we're talking about the Section 8, we're talking about VA supportive housing.
Yep.
Okay. So it's VA supportive housing, that's VASH, and then housing and urban development. So you put the
Yeah.
housing and urban development with VA supportive housing, you have HUD VASH. Most
Yeah.
people think that HUD VASH is the homeless program, but it's not. HUD VASH is a part of the homeless program. It is
Yeah.
the housing piece of the program. We still have case managers that work with people that go into targeted housing. Those are those that can afford a little bit more and they don't require case management. So we put the case management is just to get them into target housing. We also have the Veterans Justice Outreach Workers. And what they do is they assist the veterans who are involved with the legal system, but their charges aren't as bad, so it's like a diversion to keep them from going to jail. We'll case manage them and make sure they get their mental health and substance abuse, and then we'll report back to the court. So we have that liaison there. So, some of them may be homeless, but for the most part, those ones, they have housing. They just need a little help from our program, but they are also under our homeless program. So, with that, we have a nurse. She goes to those that we have housed. So we have quite a few little pieces, and a lot of our counselors are certified substance abuse counselors. So they're that as well as social workers. So they're also doing evidence-based treatment with them. So we're doing whatever we can to make sure people get in the housing and stay in the housing.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate though that it's not, you don't have units, right? It's rental units that are out in the community, and that those rental units that are out in the community are like, they're needed by the homeless vets, they're needed by the other homeless folks who are not veterans. So there's this huge need for rental units for veterans and all other homeless folks to go in. We see that time and time again.
There is.
So we're coming up on our.
I'm sorry. I just want to say
Go ahead.
that we do see one thing, that some places are starting to put together landlord incentive programs. And if we could find more of those, it might help be able to place not just the homeless veterans, but the homeless in general, because we know things happen. And if we could, guarantee the landlord that they're going to get, a double security deposit in the end or something, then perhaps that we would be able to get more people on board with housing.
Yeah. So that may be something that we want to follow up with you about those communities that have that. So we're coming up on our kind of 50 minutes, 55-minute time frame here, and we've discovered that we do better if we stay under an hour. So I'm going to kind of move us to our last kind of, do you have any parting thoughts that you just want to say, here's what I need to say? Any parting thoughts? We'll start with the panelists, and then I'll go to Ruth and Rachel and Cindy.
But when a veteran comes to my office and they say, when we do the claim, there's two questions on there. Are you homeless or are you about to be homeless? And as soon as, if they say yes to that, I start networking, trying to get them stuff. The other thing is that I also look at how can I get them income coming in? Because sometimes that's an issue. Try to find, do they have a claim that they can file with the VA to help them bring in money? And also, are they in the VA healthcare system? And if they meet that. So I kind of try to connect all three together and try and get them into the system working, and also pending that money wise coming in to hopefully through a claim.
Great, great. Any other parting thoughts? Toya, how about you?
The only thing that I would say is I think this is a good work that people do in the community and that we all do. And I just hope that the veteran would, just come in and get what they need from us. If we can't help you, we'll try our best to refer you to someone who can, but give us a shot, give us a try, and we'll do everything we can to help.
Great. Max, how about you?
Well, I want to second what Toya just said. The more we know about VA services, the more quickly we can react when we find homeless people in general and homeless veterans specifically. And for me, I would really like to find multiple better ways of being proactive and having our services available in places where homeless people go, to have a little flyer that said, are you homeless, ? In big letters, and then have people start off with NC 211, the telephone call. Most people don't know about that. Then identifying themselves as homeless and starting to get the ball rolling. And so it's kind of hard to be proactive when you're dealing only with people who are in crisis.
Yeah. So, Ruth?
Well, I just want to say thank you to Toya and Marvin and Max for all that you do to try to keep these folks safe and productive and well. It certainly is a challenge, I'm sure, and the proactive and preventive work that you do to keep them from being homeless is so important. And I know I'm interested in this incentive program for housing because as we continue the next few months of cold weather and COVID, I fear that our homelessness issues are going to be even more severe, whether they're veterans or not. But I want to reiterate, I appreciate the work that you three are doing to keep them safe and healthy and in a house, under shelter.
Rachel, any thoughts?
Yeah, so since we are sharing this for Veterans Day, I did just want to say thank you to all the veterans out there for your service. Thank you for everything that you've done for us. Thank you.
Super. Cindy, do you have anything? Are you good?
Yes, I apologize for not seeing the first part of it. I had to wait till I had some internet. But I too want to thank veterans, and I just want to mention one thing that I really like is when I do find a homeless veteran, I go yes, because there's people like you that are willing to help, Max and Tanya and I forget who else is on this call, but
Right.
thank Marvin. So thank you so much, because it's really awesome to know that we have your support when we find somebody that's homeless, that's a veteran.
Super. So I'll end us here. And again, I want to say thank you, Toya, Marvin, and Max, for all that you do for homeless veterans. I want to say thanks to Ruth, Karen, Rachel, and Cindy for all the work that they do in S3. And I want to say thanks to the city of Sanford for supporting S3. Because it's that city support that really enables us to have these kinds of conversations. And with that, I also want to say thanks to the veterans that have served for this country. We appreciate the sacrifices that you've made and hope that you can find the services and peace that you need when you come back from service. So I'm gonna stop the recording, and then the rest of you don't run away. Okay, so I'll stop the recording.